Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well. Welcome to another Patreon live on this Monday night. I hope your first day back at work after the weekend has been enjoyable. The Monday's out the way. That's the main thing. So before we get into tonight's topics and before we go and jump into the chat, guys, let's just do a quick sound check. Can you all see me and hear me clearly? We will go for the majority, not the minority. For those who are new to Patreon, welcome. And if you are looking for how to join us tonight, so you will see on your screen on your phone, if you just click that there, you'll be able to join us and then join the live chat with you there. I noticed a few people have said good evening. Tori said good evening. Observo Phil, you've said good evening. And Mark Parnell has said good evening. Good evening, guys, for you. Obviously, join us over on the YouTube live stream chat. You can jump in there. We've got all good sounds here. Yeah, so we've got loud and clear. Awesome. So a couple of things. My PC has been playing up my laptop. I do need to upgrade it. Fortunately, I have an awesome accountant who's certainly, hopefully, be looking after my books in the future. Definitely going to be looking after my books. So I'm pretty sure we can try and squeeze a new laptop out of him. But we'll get into that shortly. Jordan, good evening. You was first in the chat room. Good evening, Jordan. Hope you're well. We've got Ryan over at RT Pythons. We've got Steve Walker. We've got Andy over at Candy Mania. I believe Andy's away at the moment and he's still joining us. We've got Luke. Good evening. We've got Erin from Candy Mania. We've got the lovely and amazing Kerry Stimpson all the way from the beautiful Scottish Isles. Good evening, Kerry. She's my favourite Scottish person. I'm sorry, Steve. We've got Morph Combat. We've got Lynn over at LF Royals. We've got Lavish Royals. We've got Chris Rednall Royals. We've got Phil over at Observo. He's jumped in. Who else we got? Hunston's Herbs. Good evening. You're in the house. We've got Chris Barber. Good evening, Chris. We've got Justin over at Ballerama, and we've got Ryan Burton. Good evening, guys. So thanks all for joining tonight. I know some of you may be busy at home and you'll probably watch this maybe tomorrow or another day. But I really do urge that everyone gets in and participates in these lives. At least get involved, with the questions. I put posts up. If you guys want to ask questions, your questions can be asked on these lives when we have these sort of guests. Return of the Mac is here. Thanks for joining us, Mac. Thank you. And Kerry is obviously take that, Steve. I'm the favorite, definitely. As Max said, smash that like button. That would absolutely be awesome. And Ryan's asking, where's Smooth Balls? Where is Smooth Balls? I've even got his name right as well tonight. So I really do need some sort of trophy for getting his name right. That's for sure. So tonight's special guest. I've said to you guys before, I'm very up on trying to make our community better. Sorry, we've got a late entry in. We've got Ultimate Balls all the way from the sunny island of Ireland. Top of the morning to you. That was my best Irish accent. So I'm trying to build the community better, and the way we do that is literally we get together with outside source, we network, we find the right people out there who can help us in our hobby/industry. And I think it's very important that we understand that we need these people outside of the hobby. But it would also help if we've got people, professional people, who are also in the hobby. So it certainly makes life a lot easier when we're trying to, explain what we do. Because certainly, trying to explain to my last accountant that we basically breed snakes, and he's asking me, are they poisonous? It's kind of like, no, they're snakes are venomous, they're not poisonous. But no, I don't breed poisonous snakes, and venomous snakes. So certainly does help if we can have professionals on our level, if you like, who understand our terminology, but can also help us and point us in the right direction of where we need to go or where we should be going. And that's when I had a brainwave. I remember this gentleman coming to my HQ, and I'm not going to let the cat out the bag until I bring him out from the green room. And it kind of made sense. It just it just ticked the box, and I thought, do you know what? This guy, I need to get this guy to do my books. Lisa Richmond, good evening, Lisa. Welcome. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring on our special guest tonight, and it is the lovely, the one and only Paul. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening,
from New
Gavin.
Forest Morphs.
Yeah, good evening. It's good to be here, and thank you for such a nice introduction.
Well, all I can say is thanks for coming on. Me and you have had quite a few chats, and
Yes.
for everyone who's watching this now, if you're not following or you've not seen Paul and Jared, father and son team over at New Forest Morphs, get over and give them a follow. They've got a YouTube channel, got an Instagram, and obviously they're on Morph Market as well. Go and show them some support, guys. It's definitely worth the information that they put out is fantastic. So everyone's saying good evening. Can you see the chat your end?
Yeah, I can see. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Phil. Good evening, Chris. I won't go through all the names because Gav's already been there, but
yeah. So
thank you so much for inviting me into your community. It's very much appreciated.
Paul, welcome. All I can say is, our community is a gated community, and we are very much, what's the word? We're here for a reason, and that is to better ourselves and have a better environment for us and our hobby, and an understanding as well. So, Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself. For those who may not know New Forest Morphs, tell us a bit about your journey in the ball python industry.
So my son came back from the US about 7 years ago, fell in love with ball pythons, and had a few friends in the States that were keeping them. And when he came back home, he served a 2-year voluntary mission for our church, and had a very successful mission. Came back and said, "Dad, good evening." He said, "Come, can we get some ball pythons?" I said, "Of course we can, but don't bring them anywhere near me. You're living in." He was living in I've got 2 holiday lets in my property, so he was living in one of the holiday lets. And I said, "Keep those snakes away from me, but you're happy to do what you want to do," because I was not interested in snakes. In fact, I was actually quite frightened of them. I had a phobia for snakes. And about 6 months later, Jared decided to bring a snake into my dining room while I was having my dinner. And I said to him, "Don't bring that in here. Get that out straight away." I was telling him, "Back off. I do not want to know. Get rid of that snake," because I thought they're venomous. They're going to bite me. I just thought all the worst. Like a lot of people out there, unfortunately, misunderstand, don't they? And then I saw his first clutch, and then he let me handle one of his snakes. And I thought, there's something going on here. This is actually... Then I saw him showing his snakes to his son, who's very small, thinking, am I missing a trick here? So I got the courage to actually pick up one of his snakes, realized it was so docile. So what was I thinking? I overcame my phobia. So 7 years ago, I had a phobia. Now, as you know, I have a great love for the hobby. So my son helped me break down all the barriers to getting into the hobby by seeing him just enjoying it. And I saw him with his first clutch, and I actually watched the first eggs pipping, and it was just beautiful. And I thought, I'm missing a trick here. And I'm a family man. I embrace my children's hobbies. This one I couldn't embrace initially, but Jared wanted to set up a little business and he needed money. And I said, I'll back you, Jared. I'll give you some cash to get you going. And he was going to start off really small. And his partner fell back and I stepped up and I got into it. And we've now probably put 100 grand into the business. We've got a facility. We've got 450 snakes. We've got a limited company. We're not selling that many snakes because what we're doing is we're taking a long-term view. We're building a stockpile at the moment and we're building genetics. I've got my ultimate goal is to get a 6 recessive gene animal with about 5 cousins in it is what my goal is.
Wow.
It's going to take 15 to 20 years, but I'm looking at the long term here. So I'm not really in it to make loads of money. I'm here to kind of produce a dream snake that will be very powerful going forward, which hopefully the hobby will pay for itself. We have set up a limited company and I'll explain the reason behind that. But so that's my job really. Yeah.
Okay. And so as a profession, what is it you do as a profession, and for how long?
So, okay, so I qualified as a chartered accountant back in 1992. I went through some really tough exams in the day, very hard. The drop-off
Yeah,
rate was huge. I stepped up. I wasn't academic as a kid. I struggled. I came out with 2 grade D A levels. I served a mission for my church. I became more mature in my studies. I came out with a 2.1 degree at North London Polytechnic in accounting.
yeah,
And then I decided to try and find a job in accountancy. And I managed to get a job in Reading, working for a small company. So I've got very much small company training,
yeah.
but I qualified as a chartered accountant. I think the biggest client I've ever looked after has a £10 million turnover, which is nothing really in today's light, but for a family business, it's a decent size.
Yeah, definitely.
We've currently got about 150 clients. My son, Jared, works for me in the accountancy practice. He's the future. I'm planning to retire in 7 years.
Okay.
But my son is 10 years with me. So not only did he introduce me to the snake business, he also said to me one day, Dad, can I join the practice? And I've tried the hardest I can to put all my kids off going into accountancy. But it's just so lovely that they want to, well, one of them at least is with me. And my daughter, Emily, works in the practice and my wife
Yeah.
helps. So it's a small family business. I bought a house in the forest about 25 years ago. It came with a shop front.
And where are you located, Paul?
So I'm located in a beautiful part of New Forest, which is 2 miles outside of New Milton.
Yeah.
And we're about probably 20 minutes from Southampton and 20 minutes from Bournemouth.
Yeah. Okay.
But my front garden is effectively the forest. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a lovely setting. We love it. I've raised my family. I've got 5 kids, raised my family here. I converted the shop into an office use. So I've got now B2 use instead of A1. I may have to revert it back to A1 if I decide to get a license and sell big time on the snakes, because I can move that back to an A1. The council are aware of what I'm doing. We had a few problems building the facility. We got through that one. So the council know what I'm doing, but we're not really generating enough business to really get a license at this stage. I've kept it. We will be looking for a license. I know that's an issue that perhaps we can deal with another time, but at the moment we are just ticking along and just building something for the future.
Yeah, perfect. And I think it's one of the questions is at the moment, because obviously, we've got to, as things evolve and things change, certainly government and legislation can definitely change. Ultimately, the one thing that's not going to change is how we make money, jobs, businesses, etc., etc. And I think, for me, when I chose to become a limited business, it was a no-brainer. It was getting to the point where, it needed to be more than what a hobby was. And I think no one can tell you when it should be and when it shouldn't be. You sort of know, but what I want to get you on tonight to talk about is the scary side of being a business and doing your own, your own online accounts or whatever. And this is something that, again, yes, we could go online, and yes, we could do all our own, self-assessments and tax returns and all that sort of stuff. The difference is with having an accountant versus you doing it yourself is that there are things that you can tell me to do now which will better my future. And I can go on a year-to-year basis, do my tax returns, but all I'm doing is just rolling through, dare I say, year on, year out. So having you on board, you can say to me, Gav, now you need to do this, because in 5 years' time, this is where that will be. So it's very important for me to, like I said, get you on board, and because you know the hobby, and again, you're very good at your profession. I think it's just definitely, a wise move to get you on board. And again, guys, by all means, you're more than welcome to. And Paul's probably going to tell me off, but you can message Paul through Instagram, have a chat with him if you wish. Just ask him general questions. I will make sure he puts in an invoice to you, so he charges you by the minute. But
So we offer a free consultation, Gav. We do offer a free 1 hour.
Paul, that's not how we make money.
But
We've
also,
got to charge people.
Gav, also I have to say that Jared controls the Instagram account. So if you're sending a message to Jared, you're picking, because we've got like so much multimedia. He does the Instagram, I do the Facebook. But the best place to get me is on WhatsApp. To us, if you're on WhatsApp, I'm happy to share my mobile. I will, Gav. I mean, I'm very generous in my outlook. I like to give. I don't want to be overly exploited, but I'm happy to give a 1 hour free consultation to anyone that would like just to bounce some ideas off me. Let me whet your appetite. A good accountant, not only should he pay for himself through the tax savings that he's going to recommend. I mean, in most of my meetings, I slash people's tax bill by 50%.
Wow.
Within a couple of hours. That's what I do. And it's all legit. We're not talking about any dodgy accounting. We're talking legitimately save you money. That's what we're paid to do. We're here to look, and you need to keep as much of that money for your family or your business. And that's the name of the game. All done above board, but we're like, I look at it as eagles in the sky, flying high, keeping the standards high, but being smart enough to know how to utilize the tax planning aspects without getting the wrong side of the law, but doing it legitimately but cleverly as well. So in other words, it's high-end stuff. We're not talking about cash deals. I don't do any cash deals. I want everything to be above board. Just let everyone know it's all got to be above board and properly regularized. And if you do that, you'll be taken to a higher level of tax planning. Even having said that, a lot of my clients are better at tax planning than I am, to be honest with you, because they come up with some ideas. I'm thinking, my goodness me. I mean, even yourself, Gav, even though I know you said your gut instinct was to go limited, you've done the right thing. You've done the right thing. Even though maybe you didn't necessarily take full advice on it, I'm really pleased that you have, because I can help you even more now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, and again, I wanted to just get you on so we could talk a general chit chat and have a few questions answered, very streamlined questions just to discuss, very simple stuff. Jordan, he reckons he's only 20 minutes from you. So there's your first customer there, straight there. Well done, Jordan. And Steve Jordan has said, hi guys, hope everyone's well. Paul, top geezer. That's
thanks,
obviously
Steve.
someone else,
Thank you,
perfect. Okay, so business. So let's really quickly, limited business, sole trader. What's the difference? Can you explain the difference for people?
So we started as sole traders in the hobby, and then we what we call incorporate the business. So when the business gets to a certain size, it's tax efficient to go limited. Now, the cost of a limited company is more expensive than a sole trader to do accounts, and it's more expensive but the tax savings are significant, because with a limited company, you can take a salary out of the company if you want to. You don't have to take any salary at all. Therefore, you don't even have to operate a PAYE system, but you can take a dividend. Now, at the moment, dividends are tax efficient. So a dividend is a return on your investment. So you end up being a shareholder in your own company. If your partner wants to come in with you, you can structure the shares to yourself and your partner in such a way that you utilize all of their allowances, utilize all of their tax breaks. So for UK individuals, you can earn 100 grand as a couple without paying any high rate tax, which is
That's something definitely worth knowing.
Yeah. So having a limited company means that you and your partner trust each other, that you've got a good I would only say this if you've got a solid relationship. Also, your children. So if you've got children that help in the business, we can bring them in on payroll. When they get to 15, they're allowed to earn up to 12.5 grand a year tax free. So you define a role for your child, you put them through the books, you get tax relief and all that. They receive the money. That money then can go towards their education or their degrees, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Or they can contribute to the family household, so they can pay your rent and actually pay their way. But you have to define a role for them. So having a limited company allows you to employ your children. You can do some really clever stuff with pension planning. So if you've got a business that you're hoping to buy commercial premises, having a limited company will allow you to set them up in such a way that you can buy those commercial premises through a pension fund, which will save you a hell of a lot of tax going forward. So what I'm saying, Gav, you've done well to set up your limited company as early as you have, because when you're starting to turn over some serious money, limited company is, when I say serious, you only have to be turning over more than 35 to 40 grand a year for the limited company to kick in. If you're turning over a few thousand, then I would probably recommend sole trader for you.
Yeah.
And if you've got loads of expenses, let's face it, most of us in the hobby, you know, you don't even break even for the third or fourth year. You're lucky to claw back your money within 4 or 5 years. And I bet you there's people out there that still haven't clawed back any money because it's tight and tough out there. Therefore, what you've got is you've got losses. Now, if you've got losses that can be filed in a tax return, you can offset that against PAYE. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with losses. You can create a loss. As long as you present yourself as a legitimate business to the revenue, they'll allow you to offset that against other income in the same year. So straight away, by just legitimizing your business and saying to revenue, I am self-employed, I've incurred a loss, I want to offset that against my employed income. You could end up with a nice healthy tax refund that could either help you buy some snakes or some structure for your business. And if it's every year you're making losses, now the revenue won't tolerate losses for too long. They will expect you to make a profit at some point. But there's guys that have been making losses for 3 or 4 years that they're quite happy to do the offset. So what I'm saying is be transparent with the revenue, file correctly. Let's exploit all the loopholes that we can. And let's get, because a lot of people are going to make losses over the next couple of years, I believe, because a lot of people just reinvest their money back into structure and snakes.
Yeah. I think also as well, just to make it clear, you know, the government, some people call it a conspiracy theory, but if you notice since COVID, cash, you know, you go to a shop, you hand them a £20 note, they're looking at you as if, what the hell's this? Like, you know, what's all this about? So the cash side of things is going to be, you know, eventually, you know, people say cash is king, but actually it's an IOU note. So ultimately, what we want to do is prepare you guys with the right information that we can go, look, don't be scared. If you want to start off as a sole trader, by all means, start off as a sole trader. However, like Paul's just said, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Like, and again, I'm open and transparent with you guys. You know, if I look at my dashboard on my morph market at the moment, it states that I've got animals for sale for the value of £54,000. So there's nothing really well, there's 1 or 2 that are on there that are bumping that up. But my point is, you'll be very surprised how quick you can turn over, you know, 10, 20, 30,000 pound in a year just through a small collection. So that's the point that you go, right, okay, you know, I should be doing something about this, because reality of it is a lot of us have been scared in the past to do it, and also maybe not knowing what to do and how to do it. And this is why, you know, I urge you guys, go and follow Paul over at New Forest Morphs, and, you know, speak to Paul about any ideas, even any questions you have, because it's probably better to get it all lined up now. Like, I've got to go backwards. So we were talking, so we had a question. In fact, we might as well answer that question with, well, we're going to answer the question, but we might as well start with that question. Was Mark Parnell asked, how do we value our collection at this point? Now, for me, Paul's given me a mammoth task. So I've got to go back to when I turned my business into a limited company and look at how much the morphs were worth, or the combo was worth at that particular date. I've then also got to list down all my assets, like my racks, you know, anything else, my ultrasound machine, and some other bits and pieces. So this is a good question, really, because you'll be pleasantly surprised or shocked how much your collection probably cost you, or of the value of your collection at this moment. Yes, the market is a little bit low at the moment, but if I look back to when I incorporated my business as a limited business, the prices were quite high. So, Paul, how can people go about, you know, valuing their collection?
Okay, I think what you said, Gavin, is very helpful, because retrospectively, sometimes we've got to go back to try and work out, you know, when did we legitimately actually become a business, and when did we migrate from being a hobby to being a business? And I think that's the important date. So from your perspective, you've been running the business for several years, Gav. You run it as a sole tradership. We need to do a limited company exercise for you. Therefore, I've asked you for that list to help you with your limited company. But for many of your friends out there, they may be sole traders. They may even be hobbyists that didn't even realize they had to file a return, and it could be a bit worrying to them. Now, not to worry, because I've had clients who've come to me with a 10-year problem, and I've sorted it out. In other words, I'll give you an example. One of my top clients who I've helped out is into properties. He didn't realize that he had to declare his rental income because he thought he was making no money. So he had a 10-year set of accounts I needed to do for him, 10 years returns, filed them all, did a deal for him overall, got him an excellent deal with the revenue, and he could sleep at night thinking, I'm squared. The reality was he didn't have to pay a lot of tax because he invested so much back in. He just, all I had to do was legitimize the business. So if anyone's out there worried about, oh, I've been running for 3 years, I should have declared it, don't worry, because if we volunteer ourselves forward to the revenue, that's scoring a lot of big brownie points. If the revenue find out, which they can, whether you're trading or not, and they come down at you, you get penalties and interest. It's nasty. And they can even sell your assets to get money from you. So what I'm saying is much better to be in control of the beast and actually have me as a professional protecting you, because I'm the buffer for the clients. So clients don't have to get involved with any I'm a professional negotiator. I negotiate deals with the revenue. So if there is any back duty tax that needs to be found, I will say, look, we're making a voluntary declaration. This is what's due. We're happy to pay this amount. Can you spread it over a period of time if you need to? I structure a deal. And often when I did that 10-year investigation jobby, I looked at it and thought, actually, he hasn't got a lot of tax to pay, and he was worried about something that really wasn't a massive problem. So what I'm saying is, best for us to do the homework. Let's have a look at the numbers, see where you are. And you might find that because we put so much into this hobby that you haven't got a tax liability at all. And it might be that the taxman may even owe you money, believe it or not. So hopefully it's the latter. But if it isn't, not to fear, we'll structure it going forward nice and cleverly for you so that you mitigate any taxes going forwards.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, I don't want to say coming clean, but there's a lot to be said about, you know, putting it into some sort of order, because ultimately, like Steve's asked the question, going back to Mark's question, how do we price our collection? How do we value our collection? And like you said, you know, you've kind of got to go back, like I've got to go back and look at that market value, which morph market is very useful, because then you can look back and see when an animal was sold of the same combo in that year. So that can give you some idea, and you can use that. Obviously, the more snakes you've got, the more snakes you've got, the more you're going to have to, you know, the more work it's going to take. But certainly if you guys are starting out and you've probably got 20, 30, 40 snakes, it's certainly going to be a lot easier than trying to value 300 or more snakes. So I think the sooner you guys kind of, even if you guys start now, get yourself a little accountant book, write stuff down, and then if you need to approach Paul as and when you're ready, you've got the information ready, and say, right, Paul, I saw your live on Gav's Patreon. I'm 6 months into this now. I think I need to become a business. You've already got that information there ready for Paul, and Paul can go, right, thank you very much. Right, this is where we're going to go. You know, I think that's important, my opinion.
That's good. That's good advice, Gav, because there's benefits to doing this, because let's just work out, it is time consuming. You've got a lot to do, Gav. I know you're working through it, but it will benefit you, because let's say, for example, you've got a collection that's worth 20 grand. If you decide to go limited, you can introduce that 20 grand into your limited company as a director's loan. You are a director of that company. If you spent 20 grand on equipment, you could introduce that equipment into your company for another 20. All of a sudden, you've got a limited company that owes you 40. That means any profit you make out of the limited company, you can start paying yourself first for the snakes and equipment that you financed out of your own money over 10 years, say, or whatever period of time you've been doing it. So there's an advantage. Instead of actually paying it on PAYE and paying taxes on it, take it as capital repayment, which is tax-free back in your hands. So there is an advantage of doing this. And what can also happen is, by introducing these snakes into the new business, they become your base cost that you can use for obviously offsetting against your sales. So if you sell, let's say you had 20 grand's worth of snakes, let's say you sold 10 grand of them, then we could say, right, of that 10 grand, that actually cost me £7,000 to produce. So I'm taking 7 grand out of my 20 grand I've introduced into the business. And therefore, instead of paying 20% on 10 grand of income, you're only paying 20% on 3 grand because you're offsetting the 7 grand you put in. So what it is, it will reduce your tax bill. So not only are you going to take that money out tax free, it will reduce your tax bill because your base cost goes up because you've introduced assets into a company that's now trading. So you can use that. When Jared and I started a limited company, we had to do a stock take as sole traders and say, actually, we had 25 to 30 grand's worth of snakes before we went limited. We introduced them in. I spent another 50K on the facility, spent another 20 grand on equipment. We had to put 100 grand into the company.
Yeah.
Now I've got a very healthy director's loan account in my company. The company owes me 17, Jared's owed 30.
Yeah.
We've not taken a penny out of that business because we're not making enough money to take a penny. We're plowing it back in. We're looking at the long-term game. But when we start making money, I can take 100 grand out tax-free without having to declare it.
And that's something that it's not. And again, it's not it's getting more and more difficult to cook the books, as they say. And it's not about that. It's about literally being clever, being smart. And like I said at the beginning, you can go online and you can file your own tax returns. However, like Paul's just said, you need that specialist who can then go, whoa, hang on a minute. How much did you put in the beginning? Was it really that much or was it more? What about this? What about that? What about, soft as it sounds, like, like you've probably got, and I'll sort of round this up. You'll probably have £5,000 worth of utilities. Like when I say utilities, I mean stuff like a trolley, ultrasound machine, all your little bits and pieces of equipment, not just your racks. You're looking at everything, and it soon mounts up, and that's something that Paul then can say to you. Like Paul said something to me the other night. I can't remember what it was. He said, "Well, what about this?" And I've gone, "Oh yeah, I didn't think of that." So certainly having someone like Paul on board would definitely, like I said, you can go through life paying your online taxes, doing whatever, that's fine. But this is also a way of, working smart, not hard, and also being able to be entitled to stuff that you didn't even realize you were entitled to, if I'm right, Paul.
Yeah, things like telephones, things like utility bills. Most people who are working from home will have to share their utility bill between the snake pit and the house, and you've got to work out a fair proportion. If a limited company pays for all your telephone calls, a mobile phone can be written off, 100% of the bill can be written off through the company, even if there's private calls, for example. So the revenue aren't too fussed. If you're turning over under 1,000, you don't need to declare anything. So the first step is, I'm not selling more than £1,000 worth of snakes, therefore I don't need to do a thing, because the revenue teach the principle. I'm not interested in your business if it's under £1,000. So anyone out there, most of us are over £1,000, but let's just say if anyone is starting off and they haven't sold more than £1,000, no need to declare. But I would still declare, because you've made a thumping great big loss in the first year, which can be offset against your other income. So I would declare it anyway.
Yeah.
To answer that one.
Definitely.
Then as we get going, we start generating, say, 10 to 15 to 20 grand's worth of business. Then we're getting close to, do we go limited or not? Now, it may be better to wait for us to get to a certain threshold, which is normally about 30K before we go limited, because the tax savings are there, but the costs of running a limited company will outweigh the tax savings. So I'm not going to recommend a limited company if it's going to, all your tax saving comes to me, the accountant, because, okay, it keeps me busy, but it's not going to give you any benefits. So I won't recommend that. You've got to be doing a certain amount. But what I would do is, in that first hour, I'll sit down and as we do, Gav and Mel, we spend an awful lot of time just discussing your personal tax affairs before we then move on to the corporate affairs. And what I would do to everyone is we sit down, all 100% confidential, just to let everyone know. My ethics as a chartered accountant for 30 years are that no client knows anyone else's business unless both of them want to discuss it.
Yeah.
So no one will know about your business, Gav, unless you want to let them know on this, whichever media. On here, you're showing some stuff to help people understand. But obviously, what I'm saying is, from my perspective, if you confide in me, even if you're uncertain and you're worried, that doesn't go anywhere other than
Yeah.
me. And Jared, if you want him to be involved, my son Jared's got 10 years experience. He
Hmm.
works alongside me. He has a duty of confidentiality as well.
Yeah.
And also, if there's any conflict of interest between any clientele, which there can be, particularly in a community where there's conflict, we don't get involved in conflict, which means
Yeah.
that I might have to say to one person there's a conflict of interest. I might have to gracefully come out of both relationships, or I might be staying with one particular relationship so we don't have a conflict.
Yeah.
Saying. So I've got that to bear in mind, that as you get into closer communities, there can be conflicts of interest.
Sure.
So I'll make a judgment call on that. And if I feel there's a judgment call where there's a conflict, I'll gracefully bow out professionally and say, I recommend you get an independent accountant, because there shouldn't necessarily be that case, but in any community, there's always going to be potential conflict.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'd say over 30 years, I've only ever had one time where we've had a conflict of interest, and I've had to be professional and deal with it. But it only happens once in a blue moon. So I just throw that out there.
That's definitely interesting. I think, and I'll give you guys some ideas. So when me and Paul had our conversation, it was very in depth. You know, we spoke about family, we spoke about jobs, we spoke about past. Mel as my partner, what does she do? Because all this information, you know, Mel's job is a graphics designer, that's her full-time job. And then there's stuff that she does for me, and she works for me as in the Rat HQ, let's say. But all that's important. So if you go ahead with Paul, you know, those questions, please don't take them personally, but Paul's got to get an understanding of what your family life is like, because then what he can do, like he made me aware of bringing my children on board. I was like, wow, what? You mean I can give my children jobs and they can earn money and I can do that, you know? And one of my daughters, he's like, right, Dad, when are you giving me a job interview? When do I start? You know, she's like, I said, no, this is you know, so it's stuff like this which is really important. And, you know, Steve's kind of asked, he has asked a good question. And I think I've said it's kind of one of them. But again, going back, Steve's asked, at what point should the hobbyist breeder become a business?
Well, from the revenues perspective, if you turn over, meaning if you sell more than £1,000 of snakes in any tax year, you're supposed to declare it. That goes for any business, any hobby business that goes over £1,000, they want to know about it. That's the threshold. Now, you might look back and think, oh my goodness me, I've been in business for 20 years. Then and you're thinking, oh my heck, what have I got to do about it? I mean, don't worry, because the revenue only want to go back probably a maximum of 6. So if you've been doing this for 20 years and you're worried, I wouldn't be concerned about that. The reality is that you've probably incurred quite a few losses anyway. But the thing is, we can have that private conversation and come up with a game plan that suits you and your where you are and what you want to do at the end of the day. Because I would tell you what the revenue would expect, and then you've got to make a judgment call as to whether you want to proceed on that basis. And you know, I will probably quantify what the tax implications are, and then you make the decision what you want to do. But I'll work it all out, and the key for me is I want to make sure I can save you a hell of a lot of tax going forward. So I'm interested in your future plans. If Gav is planning on doing X, Y, Z, I've asked him for some projections of sales. I need to know what your projected sales are likely to be in the next few years, because that will help me with the tax planning, because I'll make sure that those sales are going in the right entity at the right time, and we can make sure we offset as many expenses as we can against that. But also, you might decide to invest in structure or infrastructure, some more racking systems, could be a hell of a lot of equipment. There's a whole bunch and did you know that you get 100% tax relief on any capital equipment you spend in your business? So if you spend, let's say, £20,000 on a racking system, let's say the end of your tax year, let's say your tax year end goes up to 31st of December, and you decide to buy 20 grand's worth of racks and get an invoice from Gav for 20 grand, even though you've paid for it just one day at the end of your year end, you get the whole relief written off against your profit and taxes. So you get 20 grand straight off your bottom line. And that's only if you've paid for it one day at the end of your year end. So there's a beautiful example of knowing how to reduce your tax. Because if you've got a big tax bill building, what people do is they reinvest it in equipment one day before their year end, and they get the benefit of the whole lot in the whole year, as though it's been paid for the whole year.
Yeah,
it's very useful to have that as a facility. On the stock valuation, Gav, because I wanted to come back to Mark, because I haven't really answered your question, because I said you've got to establish when you're a business. So Steve is asking that question. If you're over $1,000, you are technically a small business. Okay. Yeah. So that would be the date in which you would look at your stock valuation. What stock did I hold the date that my sales went over $1,000 is the question. If you've gone over $1,000 20 years ago, and we're not going to go that far back, we've got to make a judgment call and say, okay, let's declare the last couple of years. Let's do a set of accounts, see what your sales are, see what your expenses are. What is the profit? Is there any tax? Is there any losses? And then at that point, I would say to Steve, right, we need to get a stock valuation on your snakes. And Gav mentioned he goes to Morph Market, works out the date that he, became a business, works out the prices on Morph Market, and then you get a list of snakes, you add them all up, and let's say it comes to 50 grand. That could be what you introduce into your business as being your capital. But then in a year's time, you have to do another valuation, and you need to value your snakes in a year's time, because some of those snakes would have been sold and some will be held as breeders. And this is what people get confused. They think to themselves, how do I value my stock? Because in a year's time, the market could have collapsed 30%. My breeders are now worth 70% of what I paid for them. So in accounting, we have this principle called prudence. We write it down. We say, okay, you had 50 grand, they're now worth 35 grand. And we slash off 15K and write that off against your profit straight away. And there's another tax relief for you. Just because we slice it down. Prudence means if the market is less than what you paid, slash it down. And you just reduce your value down. So what you do is you get tax relief. Even if you haven't sold them, you still get tax relief because the value has dropped. If you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think stuff like that is so important. Like I keep saying, a lot of people will go, oh, well, I can do all my accounts online. Yes, you can. But there is stuff like this, which is, such valuable information and to understand. And again, the system is there for us to use. You've just got to be, this is where Paul comes in, because I know Paul can save me a hell of a lot of time. He can help me reduce my tax bill, but he can also, which is more important in my eyes, is build for the future. And as we come into, situations like, economical downfall and stuff like that in the market, in every market, you've got to be prepared. And this is where, again, stuff like Paul can answer the questions and get involved. So I think it's very valid information, and it's stuff that really needs to be considered, because I know we've had a couple more questions which we'll get into, but do you think we've covered those two questions, Paul?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say about stock valuation is Jared and I have to do a extra calculation each year. So what happens, the question is, you will produce most of your stock yourself. You haven't physically paid someone for them. How do you value those? Now, that's a good question, because let's say you've got like this year, we've done 150 snakes, best year ever. We've got to sell them, of course, and therefore I've valued them at, say, 35 grand. So we've had a 35 grand production season, say. The reality is we might get 20 for them if we're lucky, and we're going to hold on to a few of them. How do we value everything when we got some we're holding on to, some we're selling, and some are declining in value? You've got three variables, and it can be a bit confusing. So spreadsheets are good. Now, I've noticed that Jordan runs spreadsheets, so I'd recommend using a spreadsheet to keep track of records. Now, we've got some really intelligent software we use, which is not that expensive, called Xero. Xero is the name of the software. And it's like £30 a month, and it saves a hell of a lot of time on bookkeeping. The bank feed all the data straight into your account system for you every day. So when I'm doing my accounts, I spend 5 minutes a day on my own accounts, reconciling all my transactions. 5 minutes a day. I don't even have to go to my bank statements. My bank feed that data straight into my accounting system. And I think, oh, one of my customers has paid me. I'm going to reconcile that. Bang, done. Oh, I've paid a bill. I'll reconcile that. Bang, done. And this software is so intelligent. It even tells you where to put the money. So you haven't got to be an accountant to do it. I've got my daughter and my son helping me. So clients, it's all on the iCloud. It feeds into the data. And if I become your agent, I can actually get my staff, my daughter Emily particularly, to reconcile all your transactions for you. And we just charge you a basic bookkeeping fee for that. And so your accountant, we can have meaningful meetings before the end of your financial year to say a month or two beforehand, Gav, you're projected to make 50K profit. We want to save some tax. Let's talk about what we can do. Do you want to do a pension plan? Do you want to make a pension contribution for your company? And let's write off 10 grand of that straight away.
Yeah.
Do you want to buy some racks? Do you want to buy some more snakes? What do you want to do? Now, if you've got good accounting software, you can be proactive on your tax planning. And that's what we do for our clients. We're proactive accountants. Yeah. We're not, 6 months after a year. I wish I knew that 6 months ago. I would have told you what to do. We need to be on this. In other words, anyone that wants high-level services, we can give it to you. Anyone that wants a basic support system, we can give you what you want. We can say, look, find your spreadsheets, send us the data. We'll put it into shipshape order for you. We'll file your returns. We'll give you a few £100 tax accountancy bill, and you'll get a few £100 tax bill probably, or whatever it will be. So you've got that option, which is the basic option, or you have the middle option, which is, us doing a proper set of accounts for you, helping you with your bookkeeping, giving you some proactive advice, or you go for the limited company, which is the top end, where you're going to get the full support on dealing with all the accounts, filing them correctly, making sure everyone's all happy, giving you the tax planning. So there's about 4 or 5 different models that you can run with, and everyone at a different level. So we cater for every level of business. If it's a straightforward loss claim, it'd be a few £100. We'll do your accounts, file it for you, get your tax refund, and you pay us a couple of hundred or something. That's how we run. So it all depends on what you want. We will then quote we'll cut the cloth according to your needs, should we say.
And that software, I'm correct in saying, that can also be a taxable write-off as well, because it's fee business.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tax write-off. If you are VAT registered, you'll be able to claim your VAT back on all these expenses. Now, this is something which a lot of people don't realize, because when you look at accounts for farms and other producers of animals, if you're producing for the food market, let's say you're producing pigs and you're breeding pigs. Now, pigs that end up on our table are 0 rated for VAT. Therefore, you haven't got to worry about VAT. But when you're producing snakes that are not going on the table, but they're going for the breeder and pet market, when you get over £85,000 worth of sales, you have a month to register for VAT, and the VAT clock kicks in on you. Now, a lot of people don't realize that. And, you think to yourself, oh, my goodness me, am I sitting on a VAT problem? The good news is that there's probably an awful lot of VAT you can claim back, meaning that you can go back 4 years on all your equipment. So if you spent 100 grand on equipment, there's £20,000 of VAT there to offset. If you've spent loads of money on other items like running costs, expenses, fuel, heat, power, light, telephone, all of those might have VAT, get those back for you. So what we'd end up doing is we have to do like an exercise to go through and extract all the VAT that you've suffered and offset it against any VAT you might owe. And then the net result will be hopefully a smaller VAT bill. But you only pay VAT once you've got over the 85. So let's say you have a good year and you do 120 and you think to yourself, hang on a minute, Paul's telling me I should have been VAT registered at 85. I've had a good year. That's another 35 grand I've made over the VAT threshold. You only pay 20% on the 35. You don't pay 20% on the 120.
Yeah, that's good to know.
People might be worried about that, thinking, oh my goodness me, I've got a massive VAT problem to deal with here. It isn't as big as people think, because you only pay the VAT on the bit above the 85.
Yeah.
If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then you work out all the other expenses you've incurred, and you might have 15 grand's worth of VAT to offset. You might end up with a 5 or 10 grand problem. That's all. But what I'm saying is regularize it, get it sorted. Otherwise, the VAT man will be knocking on your door, and they can penalise you up to 100% of the VAT you can get. If you owe, say, 10 grand in VAT, they can then say, I'm going to charge you another 10 grand penalty, and I'll charge you interest on top. And your 10 grand suddenly becomes 30 because you haven't regularised your system. So I always say, and we all do it when we're new in business, we don't realise these things. And the revenue are very forgiving. If we cooperate with them and tell them voluntarily, this is where it is, we need to get this regularised, you can then know that your business is running legit, nothing to worry about. If the tax man knocks on your door, you've already made the declaration. It's all square. There's nothing to worry about. Yeah,
I think that does worry a lot of people. We've spoken before about licensing, but that's for another podcast. But half of this, half of what we do is also, like we've answered tonight, what we've spoke about tonight is, where do we class ourselves as a business? Because for those who don't know, it can be a very grey area. And again, Paul's talking about a lot of stuff like VAT, tax, and what you've got to do, pensions, all that. What I will say is this: um, being in control of your own finances, like regarding your money. I wish they taught this at school, because at school you're sort of taught to, um, you know, get a 9 to 5, work a job. This is what you're going to do, X, Y, and Z. For me, if they teach stuff like becoming, if they teach your net worth and how to manage your net worth, and then look at stuff like, you know, starting a business, because that's one thing they never teach you. They teach you business studies, but they don't teach you about starting your own business and when you should or shouldn't. What's a good idea? When does an idea or a hobby become a business? And that's very difficult. But as Paul has stated, it's actually quite easy, because you can start by, like Jordan's done his spreadsheets, you guys can go back and just start making notes. If you've come into this hobby recently, even better, because you can start now. And again, collecting that data sooner rather than later. Trust me, I've got like over 300 snakes, racks coming out of my ears, equipment. I've got heat mats and all sorts of stuff everywhere, lighting, camera equipment, all sorts. I've got a big task in front of me, but I'm going through it on a daily. My urge with you guys is to simply look at what you're doing. Don't be afraid. Take control of it yourself, because like Paul's clearly, many of you may or may not know, my ambition is to get a farm, and it's not necessarily to farm the land. My idea is to get a farm and look after my family for the future. And the way I can do that is by having land. Now, me and Paul have spoken about this, and what I do now echoes in the future. So if I can get a grip on it now, I can start basically making the first steps towards my goal. And we're not talking about a farm. And again, this isn't like a money flex and look how much money I've got. This is business. This is strategy. This is, common sense. I could be looking at farms which are 2 million in value, which sounds scary, but there's more than one way to do it if I start correctly now. And that's what this sort of live is about, is just saying, look, don't be scared. There's people out there who can help you. And we've kind of all got these worries. But if you start now going legit, and I say legit, I don't mean it like you're breaking the law. What I mean is, if you make that transition now by collecting the data, whether you become a sole trader, whether you become a limited business, you're heading in the right direction for the future.
Yeah, and I think that conversation we had, Gav, about the farm was a good one, because this is where tax planning comes in. How do we buy the farm? Now, the normal rule would be to, if you've got a pension fund, you can use your pension fund to buy the farm, because you're allowed, your pension fund can own commercial premises of which a farm would qualify. Now, you won't be able to buy the farmhouse your family are living in. So you would go to the bank and say, look, I need to borrow X number of pounds for the farmhouse for my family. It's your main residence. Therefore, when you sell that, that should be tax-free as long as you've got no more than 1 acre around your farmhouse.
Yeah.
When you get, say you get your pension fund to buy the rest, which some people have got pension pots, private pension pots that are building. If you buy that through your pension fund, you can charge your company rent for the use of that facility. So let's say you charge them 20 or 30 grand a year in rent. Your company, your limited company, can write that off as a tax write-off, but your pension fund will receive that money and pay 0 tax on that income. So this is a clever way of hiving off profits. They call it hiving off profits to your commercial premises. So there might be 1 or 2 big players in the group that have got commercial premises that they're going to develop their businesses and actually have a shop, or they might have a farm. I'm going to be around to show you how to structure that in a very tax efficient way. and using your existing resources to do it. So what I need to do is I need to fine tune the tax planning with having enough profit to justify the mortgages, because in accountancy, you've got to be careful you don't crucify the accounts too heavily when you want to borrow money. So there's a fine balance between doing all these write-offs and then going to a bank and saying, I need to borrow £1 million to buy my property, and you haven't got the numbers to support it. So you have to be, it's a bit of a juggling and balance. Now, but we managed through it, and that's why I would do I've asked Gav for all these forecasted, all these sales projections, because I want to build a future model for you that will show you how you can get to your goal tax efficiently, but have enough in the kitty to make it happen, if you see what I'm saying. And the only way to do it is to plan ahead. You can't just shoot from the hip and think you're going to get there. You've got to fine tune it now. Otherwise, you'll be paying twice the tax and get there in 20 years, not in 2 years, if you see what I'm saying. So getting the right advice from day one and knowing how you're going to do it will get you focused and think, right, Paul's come up with a great idea. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to execute it. And it all makes complete sense. And I will guide you through that process. And then you can achieve, hopefully, the best of both worlds. A reduced tax model, but good capability of borrowing money as well. It's a fine balance between the two for those people that want to expand their businesses. So, just put that out.
And that was something that really, when we spoke about that kind of got I knew what I wanted to do in my head, but when I spoke to you about it, you were like, yeah, that can be done. I was like, oh, okay. And we can do it this way, Gav. And I was like, oh, okay. So that even got me more excited. So Luke's just thrown in a question, which I think is quite a good question. He's asked, can you write off costs of hardware and new snakes as a sole trader, or is it just a limited company?
Both, actually. You can the cost of hardware is 100% tax deductible in a sole trader's accounts as it is in a limited company. The cost of new snakes is a write-off if you sell those new snakes. So you've got to differentiate between ones that you're holding for breeding and ones that you are writing off. If you hold a snake for breeding, the cost comes in, but then you have to do what they call a valuation at the end of the financial year to see what they're worth. So let's give Luke an example. Let's say he spends 10 grand on some new snakes. And of those new snakes, he's keeping them all as breeders. Takes him a couple of years to get them up to size, ready to breed. The market drops a little bit, 30, 40%. They're actually valued at 5K by the time you actually breed with them. You write off the 5 grand reduction in value against your profit. You do not write off the 10 because that is an asset that you're holding on to. You only write off costs that have diminished in value or you've sold those animals, then you get rid of the cost. So when we do your accounts, we have to differentiate between stock that's been held for breeding stock that's been held for resale, and we have to keep an eye on the market because we all know, I mean, some of the snakes I've spent money on, I'm looking at now thinking, my goodness me, they've dropped by 50%. But what have I produced with them? If I produced some high quality animals and put me back in the game, then it was worth taking that risk. So I'm not too worried about that. I just want to make sure I'm producing well for the future and get those genetics up.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, again, that's kind of, I think we've all lost money on snakes, but I think genuinely, and when I say lost money, we look at it now. So when we brought that snake compared to what they're worth now. However, a wise man once said to me, the only time you will lose money on that snake is if you don't breed it or you stop breeding it before you get your money back. So, you're never really going to lose money because you're constantly breeding it. Like my breeder male Sunset, Het Ultramale, I've said this a number of times. He owes me nothing. And at the time when I brought him, I was like, did a trade with some snakes and some money. I was like, wow, this is one of, big investment in just one snake. However, in the first year, he made his money back and then some. So in the second year, he owes me nothing, just the food bill and the heating bill, let's say, and the cleaning bill. But let's not be too hard on him. But now he's definitely an asset, and I've still got him perfect good health that I can sell as a going. I can sell him later on. So
yeah,
he when we look about losing money, and I've brought this snake for 10 grand and now it's only worth 5 grand, then you've got to make up that last 5 grand. And like Paul said, there is smart ways of doing stuff. And again, you'll get this information when you're dealing with Paul, which I think is invaluable information, because Lisa's also asked a question, as she is a sole trader. So how does it work for me? I'm registered as a sole trader already for my dog grooming business. Would I incorporate the snakes into it as a one tax thing, or set up another one? I work both from my home.
Okay, that's a really good question, Lisa. So what I would do there is obviously to go into detail with the public forum that we're in, even though we're in a gated public forum, you may not be comfortable sharing certain information with me on the other businesses. So what I would say, Lisa, is that in that 1 hour free consultation, I would have a look at your sole trader accounts for the dog grooming business and see what you're achieving. Let's say, for example, you're achieving 25 grand a year. I may be right or wrong. I mean, forgive me if I'm completely off the park, but let's say it's 25 grand. You are using £12,500 of your tax allowances already. Therefore, you might have tax to pay on the other 12.5. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is at 20% with a little bit of NI is probably not a lot. Probably 1/5 of that would be 3 grand, 4 grand tax bill, say. And then you come along and say, Paul, I've got a snake business that's doing 10 grand on the side and I'm making 5k a profit. That means if you're making 5k a profit, there's another 20% tax to pay on that profit. It's another grand on the snakes, isn't there? So you could have two separate sole traders. You could merge the businesses together. I know, Gav, you and I are discussing about all the different income streams. Now, where you have to be careful, when you merge your income streams into one business, you've got to be careful of VAT thresholds, because the revenue can construe everything as being one business, and you hit the 85 and you've got a massive VAT problem. So you must be careful with how you merge your businesses. So when I come back to Gav on his businesses as how the best way forward, we're going to look at all your income streams, and I'm going to make a recommendation. Once I've got the sales projections and your profit projections, I'll answer that question for you, Gav, which you've asked me. Do I merge all my income into one umbrella, or do I keep them separate sources? That's a good question. And Lisa's asking the same question. So I would say it depends on your current tax status and what your future profits are going to be. I like the idea of having one set of accounts that cover everything. So you've got one set of books. Otherwise you've got, it makes sense to try and put everything under one umbrella, but you've got to be careful you're not building a rod to hit yourself with. If you're not, what I'm saying is I've seen people that have avoided going into VAT because they've got 3 or 4 separate businesses, and the revenue respect that. When they look at whether your income is all under one umbrella, they look at where you're trading. So if you're trading from the same premises, that goes against you. They look at the nature of the business. So if you've got 5 different trades and you can show their different trades, they won't amalgamate it for VAT. They'll give you separate VAT status on each one. That's why I'm saying to you, Gav, you've got so many different income streams that we've got to be careful we don't put them all, even though it sounds sensible to put them all under one umbrella for accounting and administration, you could be giving yourself a VAT problem if you go with 85. So what I'm saying is that needs to be carefully looked at. So a very simple answer would be, I think, Lisa, if you're earning under 30 or 40 grand a year, say you're below 50,000 a year in profits or income, I would say that probably best to consider a limited company if you're making good profits. If you're making profits around about 25, 30, stay as a sole trader, and then just declare the snake business as a separate sole tradership. You can have 2 sole traderships. You can even go into we haven't even spoken about going into partnership. So if you've got a partner that you want to merge together, you can also have a partnership structure, which I hate them, to honest with you, because they're a nightmare really to deal with. It's much better for me if you're going to go partnership, go limited company, because you can be a shareholder rather than a partner, if you see what I'm saying. So for me, it's either sole trader or limited company. I just don't like partnerships. I don't like them. But I'll look at them and I'll advise what the tax implications are of a partnership. But for me, it's either sole trader, limited company, or pension fund is another option to go. So
No, that's a great question, Lisa. Thank you. And again, it's a question, you guys know we've got the LP imports, I've got snake business, you guys know I work as freelance regarding enforcement for the local councils, and also there's that, like Paul said, it kind of makes sense to put them all under one umbrella. However, does it? And that's something, again, not being funny, but this is where it's a specialist question, depending on your situation, that
Yeah,
needs to be tailored by a professional. And
that's right.
this is, again, where Paul comes in. And again, I'm not trying to sell Paul's services. I'm not trying to push anything on you guys. This is something that you guys have asked for. Gav, when do I become a business? Well, do you know what? Let's get an accountant on here who can talk the talk and walk the walk, and that's exactly what Paul does. He's a professional in his own right regarding that, and he's also in the hobby, so he knows about what his food bill is kind of the same as yours regarding the snakes. His heating bill is going to be kind of the same, so he can guesstimate and work stuff out, and he can say stuff to you that maybe you didn't think of, and this is why it was important to get Paul on this live. So
Yeah. If you're renting accommodation, let me give you another example. Let's say you're not buying a house, you're renting it, but a third of the house is being used for your business. Let's say your rent's £1,000 a month. Technically, £300 of that could go as a write-off against your snake business, because you could argue with the HM Revenue Customs that this is not just a residence. I'm paying
yeah,
rent, but I'm paying for my animals, and they've got at least a third of what I've got here myself. Therefore, even if your landlord's getting £1,000, you might decide to allocate 300 of that a month against as a tax write-off, and I think you'd be fair to do that. And you could argue the toss with the revenue if they've challenged it, because I do here. I mean, I've got 2.5 acres of land. I've got a holiday let business with 2 holiday lets, and we launched our first snake holiday last week. Had a family come and stay and bought 8 snakes with me last weekend.
hmm
First time breeders. They had a wonderful time. They want to book again in October. I've built a facility out the back, which we did during lockdown, which we built as a family
yeah,
for about 25k. It would have cost us 50 had we got professionals in. Jared is a carpenter. He's not a carpenter, but he's just very good with his hands. He built
yeah,
most of the timbers. I got mates to help me with the brickwork. We put a concrete base. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on a minute. All these costs are on my land, and I've got to charge my company for that. But you've got to be careful if you own the property. If you overdo your commercial element, there is a sting in the tail which you've got to watch, which is, let's say you own your property and you put more than £10 a week through for office use of home. So the revenue will accept like 520 quid a year write-off. Yeah. If you put too big a figure in your accounts as a write-off, when you sell your house, the revenue could knock on your door and hit you for some capital gains tax, because it's a
mm,
business rather than your personal residence.
yeah,
So we would advise and say, don't go crazy.
yeah,
But if you're renting, go crazy, because it's not your property.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
own the property, just put through a little bit for office use of home, that the revenue aren't going to knock on your door when you sell saying,
yeah.
I want 20 grand tax out of you. You just sold your house for 2.5 million or something silly, but you've run it as a business and I want a share of your action, because they will do that.
Yeah, and I think that's clever. And again, talking about stuff like that is stuff that, again, depends on your circumstance, on the type of, and again, the situation. This is why, if you do go into consultancy with Paul and you are getting advice from Paul and you choose to get Paul and his company on board, you know, he needs to understand the structure of your family as well
Yes,
as the
very much.
projection of your family and where you want to go in the future and what you want to do. Because all that, it's not just working your tax bill out, it's working your future out. So it's really important to understand that. And again, it's not just um, it is a valid. They are valid questions. Like I had no idea what Paul was going to ask me when he was asking me. I was like, um, um, yeah, well, I've got, I'm trying to relay my children's ages, and it's like Paul's asking me, and I'm like, well, Lakai's 6, Eliza's 13, so on and so on. And I'm like, God, I never expected it, but at the end of it, it sort of all made sense, and I was like, wow, what a plan. So, but I digress. One question came from Jordan, which was talking about money from overseas, regarding being paid in dollars versus sterling. His question was, he's had an inquiry from the USA about a snake. It's not a cheap one. Would it be as simple as transferring the money over? He's not trying to dodge the tax man, but what he wants to know is what's the best way to deal with that customer? Is it best to deal with it in sterling, or is it best to deal in dollars?
So if you want no risk to foreign exchange, because obviously the exchange market is changing every day. The good thing is that the US dollar has been very stable lately, but we've got the US elections. There could be some volatility.
Yeah.
I personally would negotiate a deal in sterling. That way you're moving the risk to the buyer. So the buyer then takes the risk because he's got to translate his dollars into sterling, and you haven't got to worry because you've agreed. Let's say it's a 10 grand snake. If I negotiated with the guy and said, look, you can have it for 10, but it's got to be paid into my account by this date, he can buy on the US market a spot rate. He can guarantee his exchange rate if he wants by forward buying his spot rate. They call it a spot rate. So let's say the exchange rate was £10,000 is the equivalent of, say, $13,000.
Yeah.
He would go to his bank and say, I'm buying a snake of Jordan. I've got to give him the money within the next 2 weeks. He's going to ship it over. It's going to cost me $13,000. That conversion rate gives Jordan his 10 grand because it's a guaranteed spot rate and he knows he's going to get his 10 grand. And there's no risk. Now, the other way of doing it is to say to him, okay, you pay me $13,000 into my US. I've got a US account I've got myself in the UK. Pay that $13,000 into my account. But what happens if the exchange rate goes against you? Your 10 grand could suddenly be worth 9.5 or even 9. You could lose 500 or 600 quid on the deal. So there's exposure to foreign exchange risk, but you can get around it by doing a deal in sterling or getting your customer to buy forward the rates before you do the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So I've had that before with LP
Yeah.
stuff. So like the euro versus the pound.
Yeah.
I can go in 1 minute and go, right, I need to pay LP rack systems X amount and do the conversion. And literally within 5 to 10 minutes, while I'm transferring the money round, it's changed again. And there was one incident literally within 5 minutes. It was asking me for an extra £200 because of the exchange rate.
Yeah. Oh,
and I just held on a little bit longer, and it actually brought it back down. I was about £5 over what I was originally going to pay, but that's how volatile it can be, unfortunately. But like Paul said, getting that spot rate is definitely going to help.
The other thing, Gavin, to think about is, and we talked about this because Gavin and I were just trying to solve another problem, weren't we, about shipping snakes from the US to us. And one of the biggest problems is the cost of shipping is quite expensive.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with various people to see what the prices were. This is the first time I've got 8 snakes I want to buy from the US in the next six weeks. I've got them on a good deal. I mean, it's a fantastic deal, and it's going to further my projects to the next level. And there's Europe and the UK don't have those genetics, and I'm thinking I've got to look at the US market because I need the genetics. Now, the guy who's given me the deal, I won't say who it is, but he's a really very high-end, good, reputable breeder. He thought the cost of shipping £10,000 worth of snakes to the UK would be about £1,000. And I thought, the discount you've given me, I'd live with that. If it's £1,000, I'd live with that. When I actually worked out the numbers, do you know how much I've got to pay for those £10,000 snakes?
Go on.
Have a guess how much I've got to pay.
Are we talking shipping or shipping and tax?
Shipping plus the tax.
Well, I go on. I know what the answer is going to be, but go on.
It was nearly another £5,000. So you're buying 10 grand of snakes thinking, man, I've got a deal. And then all of a sudden the sting in the tail, where you try and ship them over, it's £5,000. I'm thinking, my goodness me, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
For that kind of money, I'd want to fly over there for have a holiday and smuggle them in my trousers.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got to try and work that one out, Gav. That's for another day. But all I'm saying is,
100%.
We're looking at tax. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, Paul. And again, like you said, hopefully that answers Jordan's question, because I'm quite aware of the time. I wanted to squeeze this one question in, because Tori's asked on Patreon, what about the ASFs? Are we able to deduct the costs of keeping them to feed our snakes from our tax? So in other words, breeding rodents to feed our collection.
Yeah. So the answer to that one would be there is a tax write-off for feeding your snakes. Now, when you're breeding them yourself, it's a slightly different ballgame. I can't convince Jared to start breeding them because he's got an allergy to various things. But I'm paying nearly £700 a month for my snake bill. It's big.
Yeah.
Maybe more in the breeding season, that'll jump to £1,000 a month. I mean, it's serious. So anyone that's doing it, I get it. So how would you go about getting the tax write-off? Well, all of the food for your rats is a tax write-off straight away.
Yeah.
The equipment is 100% write-off straight away. You buy your breeders. Now, obviously, you're keeping some as breeders, and eventually they're going to go into the food chain, aren't they? Because you're self-producing all your babies to go through. Now, I would say that the adults are going to be fed eventually because they're not going to be breeding forever. I'm guessing that, I mean, I've never done it, but I'm guessing that after a certain number of months, these breeders are going to be recyclable, aren't they?
Yeah, we find about 6 months
6
is
months.
there. I mean, you may get some that go to 9 months. Normally 6 months is your average.
Yeah. So I think the reality is, depending on how big your ASF system is, if it's a massive system, I would go for a highly technical approach and actually value them similar to the snakes. What are breeders? What are fed? What are going to, But if you've got a small collection of ASFs that you're feeding into the system, I'd probably write off the initial cost straight against your profit. I wouldn't mess about. The revenue like that. I mean, we don't want to overcomplicate things. So if you're spending, let's say, I mean, I don't know how much we're spending on the ASFs, but let's say, I mean, Gav, you've got ASF, haven't you? How much you spend? How much did you spend on buying your breeders?
So, well, we have to go way back, but I mean, if a Patreon member comes to me and goes, Gav, can I have a breeding colony of ASFs off you, which would normally be a 1.3. I normally do roughly about £20, £20 for a 1.3 group for a colony.
I might come to you for some if I can convince Jared then, because
100%.
I like the air. I mean, I feed a lot of my collection, but I think to answer your question, that level of investment, write it off. Don't even think about a complicated model. Write it off against tax. Let the revenue challenge it. They'll be wasting their time because, if it's let's say you've got a system that's massive and you're breeding them for the market, not just for your own use, that's a different ballgame.
Yeah, because I know one breeder who basically he's got thousands of snakes. He's in the UK, and when I say thousands, he's probably got probably 1,000 snakes, and he produces probably he produces enough rodents for himself, and he sells to a few of the local breeders, and I think he ends up feeding 1,000 snakes, and it costs him about £30 a week to
feed his colony,
to feed his collection.
Wow.
So you can look at that. I mean, to me, I'd look at that and go, right, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to probably set up the rat business as a separate entity and have that, and that's something else that can be considered and again, like Paul said, if he gets that large, then you've got to be looking at, setting that up as a business, and then could balls to you buy from rats to you, that sort of thing. So there's definitely ways and means of doing it, but like Paul said with the initial question, yes, you can write them off, and that's how it works. Max dropped in some figures. So per 1.4, that's a 1 male, 4 females. It costs him £24 in food. Is that a month? I presume that's a month, or is it per weekish?
I'd record that on either my spreadsheet or my accounts package. £10 of sawdust, record it, write it off.
Yeah.
By the way, keep bills if you can, because I know it's a pain in the backside to keep bills, but the revenue technically could ask for supporting paperwork. So try to keep bills if you can.
Yeah, definitely. So that's again, I think on average, for me, it costs me about 75p per rodent to produce a rodent.
That's good.
Obviously, you've got to think of time. You've got to go in there, you've got to clean them, feed them, water them, etc., etc. And again, a rodent business is a whole nother level, because a lot of people will go, well, I'll just have a self-watering system. Trust me, you will lose more rodents with a self-watering system than you will with bottles. So when you've got bottles, you've now got to go in every day, do the water bottles, and top that up and top the food up. Where if you've got a watering system, you fill up a big container and that will probably last you 4 or 5 days. However, when you go back in there and you see that most of your rodents are drowned
Oh my
because they
goodness.
chewed through or there was a stuck nipple on the water system, it becomes heartbreaking. You
Mm.
know, it becomes heartbreaking. So time is time is definitely a factor when you're breeding rodents. You will need time. But I would also advise, if you are breeding snakes, you really do need to get into breeding rodents. Even if you just have a couple of colonies and you've got those rats on tap, as I'll call it, it's certainly going to help you, especially if you're producing babies.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah. Paul, what can I say? I mean, we've been talking now for an hour and 20 minutes. Please don't put this onto my accountant bill, but but look. I mean, we've had a fantastic discussion. I think I'm pretty confident you've answered everyone's question, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about this on this week's Discord live with Jordan and probably the rest of the community. The information that you've given us, I think, is invaluable. So I really do appreciate your time on this one.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Gav. It's my pleasure. It's lovely to meet your community, and some good questions there. And there's probably lots of others that people may want to share on a personal level. Please feel free to reach out. WhatsApp is the best. Maybe, Gav, if you're happy, you can share my mobile with the community if you want
If
to do
you're
that.
happy, Paul, I'm happy to do that. I'll do a
My
separate
mobile's
post
good.
tomorrow.
Yeah, my mobile is a good point of contact. I do like the WhatsApp. A lot of my clients use it. We can do a video chat if you want to, or private conversation, whichever way you want to go. But we can explore all your questions, put you in the right way to go, and tailor any advice cut the cloth accordingly, really, and according to what your budget is. And I'm going to be very honestly, between you and I'm going to be very generous with our fee structure. It will be very sensible and doable. It's not going to be crazy, and we love the community. It's our way of. I know. I even trade in snake candy. You know that.
You train what? Sorry.
I trade in snake candy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I was kind of hoping you'd say that. To be fair, Paul. Yeah. So snakes talk a lot. Trust me. Yeah, and again, guys, it's very difficult to say what's what because every individual's needs is different, and that's what's important to understand. Is that you know it's so difficult to try and answer every single person's question directly at that, oh, there's this one answer, but depending on your situation, there could be a different answer for that. So it's very important that you just got a taster of what Paul is all about, what the information he has, the knowledge he has, and how he could work for you guys and what he can do. Don't be afraid. If you need to become a business, please, I'll do a post tomorrow with Paul's details. I'll share that tomorrow on the Patreon. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit myself up or hit Paul up. Everyone's saying they've appreciated your time, Paul. Amazing information.
Yeah. I can read the comments there, Gav. Unfortunately, I haven't worked out how to join the chat, but I wanted to just say thank you to it. Well, maybe verbally I can express my appreciation for you guys giving me your time as well. I know I've given a little bit of my time, but we give each other time. And this is wonderful. I think a wonderful way of helping each other, because Gav's got the vision here, and he can see the need to bring in professionals, not just myself, but I know that you're thinking about other professionals, because I had an issue with my facility that I had to get through.
Yeah.
And having a lawyer or someone to help me with legal issues would have been quite helpful. But we managed to get through it in the end. But I would like to be invited. If you do a lawyer one in the future, Gav, do invite me in, because I think I could benefit. And if there's any other professionals that you feel could help the community, then I'm all in for it.
Yeah, there's definitely a few I've got lined up. We've got an exotic vet to hand,
That
which
really helpful.
Yeah, is another one which is really helpful because there's a
Yeah.
lot of information that she has, um, which could, really help us as a community, not necessarily to breed, but to also understand the reptile, um, the reptile species. She's very knowledgeable, and again, we'll get her on, and by all means, you're more than welcome to jump on with that as well.
Oh, thanks, Gav. No, I always find with vets, there's never a decent vet close to hand to help you with any issues, is there? And that's the problem. We don't have, where we are based, you've got to travel a long way to get an exotic vet that knows what they're talking about. You know?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be sharing details. Obviously, with Paul tomorrow on a post, um, guys. But for now, please go over and give New Forest Morphs a follow. Like he said, Paul said that Jared looks after Instagram. So if you start saying thank you, Paul, for the live tonight, really enjoyed all the information. Jared may not know, so just bear that in mind. But we will post Paul's details tomorrow as well.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely
lovely, Gav.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right, Paul, you just stay there. I'm going to kick you backstage
Alrighty.
and just sign out to everyone.
Okay.
Awesome. There you have it, guys. I think getting Paul on tonight and getting an accountant's point of view regarding what you should do as a business is very important. And I hope the information that Paul shared tonight is very helpful and very useful. There is more than one way to do this hobby. And I'm not saying you should become a business, but I really do think if you start collecting that data when you are ready, it's definitely going to be worth your while. And like I said, people like Paul, you haven't got to use Paul, but for me, it's a no brainer. Paul's already in the industry, he knows the hobby, he will know certain things that you may not even consider, which he certainly opened my eyes to a number of things. So definitely, please, guys, like I said, show some support. Go and give Paul a follow, Paul and Jared a follow on Instagram and YouTube. Um, Steve Walker said, "I will be in touch." Absolutely awesome, and I will keep you posted with my journey. As I said, with most of you, I am very open and upfront because I want to share. If I can do it, you guys can do it. And this is what's important, that we all grow together. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign out. Have a fantastic Monday evening. Hope you've enjoyed this one. And please feel free to let me know your feedback. But for now, take care. I'll see you guys on the next one.